In the city of Kansas, a black Dodge Charger car is driving quietly on the snowy road when the driver is suddenly pulled over by the police. The driver takes out a handgun, then waits for the cop to arrive. The officer approaches the driver and asks to see his license and registration. As the officer waits for him to bring the documents, he's joined by his wife Jane, who asks if he needs any help, but he says he has everything under control. Jane gets back to her car and drives a few distance, but couldn't just leave, so she turns around to wait for her husband Mike. While trying to check for the car's plate number, the driver drags Mike closer and shoots him in the neck. Then he reverses his car, which knocks Jane down before driving away. Jane quickly gets up and starts shooting at the driver, which only damages the back window and the driver escapes. Jane immediately calls for backup while trying to stop her husband's bleeding, but he ends up dying in her hands. In the evening, the killer arrives at a motel where he intends to spend his night. A news report shows that a mysterious person known as the Satanic Slasher is going around Kansas State and killing people, which has amounted to 16 victims. In his room, the Satanic Slasher, who appears to be wearing a mask, goes to a smaller compartment in the room where he lays down to sleep next to his rifle. The next morning, he drives to a pharmacy store where he waits in his car till it's evening. He watches as a young lady arrives in her car and goes inside the store. Minutes later, the young woman comes out of the store with a man and goes back to her car, only to be attacked and killed by the Satanic Slasher. Afterwards, he goes into the pharmacy where he steals some drugs for himself. Jane is in a therapy session, which she doesn't like but has to wait because it is mandatory for her to attend. So when the time is up, she leaves the office. That night, Jane keeps having nightmares about the day her husband died. So she goes to do her own research on the killings happening lately. That's where she discovers that her husband must have been killed by the slasher. Since the police haven't come up with any arrests on the death of her husband, Jane has taken a short leave from her trooper duties and prepares to find the slasher herself. That's when her father steps in to stop her, but she's already made up her mind on the situation and leaves. Meanwhile, on the highway, the thief is driving when he sees a couple stranded on the side of the road. After taking some pills, he parks his car around the corner of the road and goes to the man who's changing his tires and smashes his head with a sledgehammer. The lady in the car hears the noise and comes out of the car to check what's happening. That's when she sees the body of her partner. When she turns around, she finds the slasher staring back at her. She tries running away. Still, the slasher follows her. While running, the lady sees a truck coming and stands on the road to ask for help, which causes the driver to hit the brake at the last second, causing the vehicle to crash and kills the lady, while the slasher stands aside and watches as the truck catches on fire. Afterwards, the slasher takes the blood from the dead couple to draw a pentagram on their car. Using the car radio, Jane asks for any updates on the recent killings, but gets no positive response. Later, Jane goes to the FBI office to get involved with the investigation into the Satanic Slasher, where she meets with FBI agent Zolan, who's in charge of the slasher's case. Jane explains to Zolan that her husband was killed by this psycho and wants to help the system with the investigations to see that the slasher is captured. The agent only looks at her before apologizing for loss, before informing her to go home and let them handle the case. Later that evening, Jane isn't feeling too well, so she goes to the bathroom to check herself. That's where she discovers that she's pregnant. Later, she gets a call from Becky, the FBI agent who was with Zolan in the office she went to that day, asking for them to see. During the meeting, Agent Becky tells Jane that if Zolan learns that she's going against his back, she'd get in trouble. She then shows Jane the route that the slasher has been on in the past few days. According to the study so far, they've learned that the killer has a specific target, like a gun dealer he killed and took his gun, including some frag grenades. The last one was of the pharmacist, after which he steals a couple of antidepressants drugs. To show Jane the routes in the motels the killer has been to, Becky drives her to one of them. Inside the space, there's a lot of blood all over the floor and on the walls, with an inscription that calls out Satan and one that says, "Open the gates." Using the agent's computer, Jane shows Becky that the killer's real name is Richard. Judging by his traveling data, Jane concludes where the slasher's next stop would be, so she decides to intercept him there. Before leaving, Agent Becky shares one last information. There's been an explosion somewhere in Kansas City that has left 7 people dead. The explosives matches the one slasher stole from the gun dealer, warning Jane to be careful. Inside a church, a priest has just finished his sermon and is about to go home for the day when the slasher arrives. Thinking he came for confession, the priest gets ready to hear what he has to say, only to get stabbed with a metal pipe, which allows the slasher to drink the priest's blood from it. Following the route that the killer has been threading for days now, Jane makes it to a motel close to Pennsylvania. There, she meets with a receptionist who asks if you've seen a dark white male who came here alone to request for a room. The man checks his record, and for a moment it looks like he can't find anyone matching the description, until he suddenly finds one. He tells Jane the room number and the direction to follow, so she arms herself with her gun and calls for backup before going to the room. When she enters, she's attacked by the slasher who throws her around the room. Jane is a good fighter as she manages to defend herself with any object her hands could reach. As she tries to run, she's grabbed from behind by the psycho killer and thrown out the window like a rag doll. Before the cops could arrive, the slasher has moved all his things out the window and gets on his car. Still not giving up on her pursuit, Jane takes some of the clues she found in the slasher's room, where she learns the place he'll be going to next. That night, Slasher calls a mysterious number he found on a newspaper that says that they're accepting believers. A man receives the call, and Slasher tells him that he needs help finding another believer that would help him carry out the Satan's work, so he gets invited to their church. The Slasher makes it to what looks like a mansion at the middle of the night, where he's received by Marvin, a true and dedicated Satanist. Marvin then takes the Slasher to meet with their priest alongside other members. They give him a warm welcome. He obviously didn't engage in their dining and only makes a simple request. He tells the priest that he's looking to get some information on someone that would help with his satanic course. The priest tells him to meet Marvin as he can provide him with any information he needs. The priest asks if he has any family, and the Slasher says no. Believing that he found his way to the demon himself, the priest consumes some happy powder before passing it on to his members. He starts to preach before making the followers to chant in sync as they hail Satan. Marvin takes Richard to another room to ask for some information on the person he wants him to find, only for Richard's response to creep him out. He asks him to help find the information of a mysterious man that he doesn't know his name or where he lives. He only gives a description of the kind of work he does. The next evening, Slasher walks in and watches how the priest makes his members worship Satan. After giving his sermon, the priest puts a black substance like a holy communion in their mouths. Once everyone has taken it, they take off their clothes, and one of the lady even lays down for the priest to come on to her. The Slasher couldn't stand this and walks out of the room. Marvin meets him to give him the information he requested, which contains the name Leonard Wilkes and a home address. The Slasher then takes his bag and leaves the building. Marvin follows to tell him to wait and tell the priest about his departure as part of their courtesy. The Slasher keeps ignoring him and puts on his mask. He turns to tell him that he sees Marvin as a true Satanist. Marvin sees the pickaxe he's carrying and realizes that he's the satanic Slasher. He tells Marvin that he's going to allow him to leave only if he keeps his mouth shut, or he'll find him and it's going to be his end. With this, Richard goes into the building and uses the axe to kill everyone one by one, including the priest, before setting the whole building on fire. Before leaving, he notices something outside, so he puts his mask on a stick and puts it on the window. The mask is shot. Jane is the one behind the shot. Just as the Slasher makes his way to his vehicle, Jane tries to follow him, but her car gets rammed by the Slasher, which allows him to escape. Jane keeps yelling at the police officers for showing up later because she called them even before she arrived here. They still don't believe the description of who is committing all these crimes, as they suggest that it could be anybody. Jane makes it clear to the officers that 20 years ago, devil worshipper Richard Joshua Reeves committed a mass murder in a church. Afterwards, a satanic metal band starts writing music about the killings and even made an album on it. She believes that the Slasher is only following the footsteps of the original Richard Reeves to commit these murders, and his intention is to finish what the original Richard started. Since the police are yet to put clues together to catch this psycho, the Slasher makes his way to Pennsylvania to his victim's home. He starts arranging some TNT he intends to use for his next mission. The Wilkes arrives at his house alongside his wife, only for the Slasher to hold them hostage. He tells the man to comply if he still wants his wife alive. Meanwhile, Jane has been able to follow his trail, where she discovers his whole plan. Since today marks the anniversary for the 3 Mile Island nuclear explosion in the history of America, the slasher intends to use all the explosives he's gathered, plus the little knowledge he has on nuclear power, to start a very massive explosion that could lead him to the center of the earth, thereby opening what he calls Hell's Gate. Since Time Wilkes works as a manager at the nuclear plant, the security guards allow him to pass without them noticing that the slasher is hiding inside the car. Once inside the building, Richard throws a grenade into 2 securities, instantly killing them. When Jane arrives at the nuclear plant, she identifies herself and explains to the security guards that they are in danger. At that moment, the plant's siren starts wailing, followed by a call from one of the guards informing them that they have an intruder. Now convinced that they're in trouble, the guards follows Jane's instructions to search the building and neutralize the threat. Slasher makes it to another room where he finds a security hideout through a concave mirror and shoots him. He tells the other staff to exit the building while he makes Wilkes to deactivate the nuclear plant's cooling system and override failsafes on the computer terminals. Backup soon arrives with Jane and the security guards taking the lead. Once inside the control deck, the chief officer wants a way to negotiate, but Jane points out that this isn't a hostage situation as Richard will kill the man once he's done with him. He tells them what the slasher plans to do and the reason why he's there. While the other team tries to melt the front door to get inside, the slasher ends up killing Wilkes. He then pulls off his clothes to reveal a bunch of TNT bombs wrapped around his body, while in his hand is a hand grenade he to use as a detonator. Since there's no way to make it inside on time to stop the psycho, the chief officer instructs the evacuation of civilians around the area. The other security guard tells Jane to follow her as they move across the building into a secured room that allows them to see the slasher through a thick glass. After making some drawings on the floor, Jane watches as the slasher grabs the hand grenade, ready to bring the whole place down. The security guard couldn't meet his doom that way and runs away. Jane picks up the rifle left by the security and starts to shoot at the reinforced glass multiple times. This leaves enough crack on the glass that allows her rifle to go through it. The slasher is about to pull out the pin from the hand grenade when Jane shoots him in the leg. She shoots him again, but this time the bullet hits his hand and he drops the bomb. The bomb explodes, but it doesn't affect the TNT on the slasher's body. Jane shoots him again, and this time the man collapses. Few months later, we see Jane preparing a bedroom for her oncoming baby before going to her late husband's closet to stare at his uniform when the slasher appears behind. Turns out this is just a dream. Just to be sure, Jane goes outside to look thoroughly through the neighborhood. Later it is revealed that the slasher is still alive and he's been transported to a highly sophisticated prison. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video and would love to see more from this channel, please like and subscribe.